right, we have our 910, which is the, there we go. Legislative priorities, 2025 legislative priorities. And with that, we'll give the floor back to Deputy Rothstein.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. And I'm welcoming up Jeff Neal, who's here in person from Nielsen Merksimer.
All right.
In December and January, respectively, the county entered into agreements for state and federal legislative and regulatory advocacy services. We are very pleased these agreements provide for a Lake County presence in Sacramento and Washington, D.C. Attached to your board's agenda and projected here are draft state and federal priorities. Neither list is exhaustive of every possible priority. Lake Pillsbury and the Potter Valley Project FERC proceeding will require work at the federal level in 2025 as one example. And advocacy to maintain relied-on county funding streams is always a priority, and related challenges with that evolve over time. Our advocates from both Nielsen Merksimer and Paragon Government Relations do indicate it is generally desirable for these priority statements to be broad, allowing action within those categories of emphasis to be quickly taken as needed. During today's item, you will hear presentations from both of Lake County's advocacy firms. They will each provide an overview and invite discussion from your board and others gathered here today. And so first, I would like to introduce Jeff Neal from the county state-level advocacy firm Nielsen Merksimer.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members. Jeff Neal, Nielsen Merksimer, your state representatives in Sacramento. Happy to be back in Lake County this morning. I just want to speak for a moment to follow up on what Matthew said about some of the usefulnesses of adopting a set of priorities. As he said, they're not meant to be an exhaustive list of every issue that the county might engage on in Sacramento. Legislators have begun introducing bills. There are maybe about 400 bills introduced so far. We will get up to far more than that. The bill introduction deadline is February 21st, and we'll see most bills will be introduced in that last week. As always, we'll read through them all and refer any of them that we think the county might want to take action on to Matthew and his team. But adopting these priorities is a way of both giving us and your team in the county executive's office guidance on not just what kinds of issues you might want to respond to, or if a high priority issue is raised by the legislature, or the governor's office for that matter, but the issues that the county wants to be most proactive on, changes that you want to proactively seek instead of just respond to. So it gives us that direction to work with your legislative representatives, with committee chairs in the legislature, with the governor's administration to try and get some movement on those changes. Not necessarily solutions. We can always try to solve problems, but many times we think of as problems are really just conditions that we can try and continually manage and improve as best we can. Some of the themes that I think we'll see from the legislature this year, are affordability. There's been from both sides of the aisle working on affordability, whether that has to do with electrical rates, housing, or any other area of life. Response to the LA fires, of course, will be a major theme this year from not only the third of legislators that have at least part of Los Angeles County in their districts, but as Lake County knows as well as anywhere, any kind of movement that we can get on helping communities mitigate fires and respond to fires and create that resiliency can be helpful. And then, of course, what we already knew and was highlighted for us even more so last night will be the interaction between California and the federal administration, and vice versa, the federal administration's response to anything that happens in California. That situation will continue to play out over the next few years, but that will have a major effect on proposals from the governor's administration and the legislature that in many times will affect the county, because obviously counties provide most federal entitlement programs and in a way run on federal money, whether it goes through the state or comes to the county directly. So happy to discuss any of the priorities or answer any questions you have, and interested to hear the discussion on what the priorities for this year will be.
Supervisor Pyska?
Good to see you, Jeff. So these are the broad priorities, but I just want to highlight a couple of things that are, that are just details. We don't have to change the priorities, but just for your awareness. The wildfire resilience and fire suppression, we have been really successful over the last many years with bringing in grants to do this work. And now we're caught in a place where those NOFAs are being canceled or postponed or whatever is happening, particularly with BLM, which is not a state issue. But just generally speaking, when I go to FEMA trainings and they say every $1 spent in mitigation saves $7 down the road, and we have built systems to prepare and harden our communities much more effectively than we did 10 years ago, it's really critical that those funds continue to flow. And I know there's going to be some issues with federal dollars, but from the state, one of the things, and this board will hear more details next month, one program that was incredibly successful was a defensible space program from the State Fire Safe Council, and that was $500,000. That was supplemented also by Chair Crandall and myself to create a program where seniors and low-income folks could have their defensible space done completely 100% covered under this grant. We built up capacity. We have contractors out there that have built their businesses around these types of programs. And so, this is the progress that we've made, and we need to make sure that we have funding to sustain the work, because it's not something that we can stop. If that funding stops, we lose those operators. And then we have very vulnerable community members who have no options to make their homes more defensible and fire safe. And then under infrastructure, it's going to be interesting to see how the funding continues to flow around broadband and implementation of middle mile and BEAD. And I know we're going to hear more about that from Ben Rinkelman later today. But, my district was cut out of a big part of my district was cut out of the middle mile funding. So I'm still a little stung over that. So I want to make sure if there's a way that we can get the Highway 175 corridor folded back into that funding, that would be great, because that is an area where it's very rural. Broadband is critical. There's a school there. There's a lot of reasons why we need to make sure that we have connectivity along that corridor as well. So those are the two things that I just really wanted to highlight on this list.
Supervisor Owen?
Hi, nice to meet you, Mr. Jeff. I think for us in District 1 and throughout the county, one of the most important issues will be roads. And I know particularly District 1 and District 3 are really needing some attention. Our roads are absolutely atrocious. I actually had somebody come to my ranch and have a blowout trying to come down through Socrates Mine Road. So the funding for roads and infrastructure is going to be huge for us. I think that is our number one complaint. Lake Pillsbury also is going to be huge. I really want to put on the boxing gloves on that one. Thank you.
Vice Chair Rasmussen? And then
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to make a couple comments. When I was reviewing these, I kind of looked at them with the Vision 2028 in mind, and I think that that these legislative priorities do line up well with what our vision is, and I think that's important. You know, if that's our vision, we ought to be advocating for, you know, for these things. And I think it's great that we are, you know, hiring outside firms to keep an eye on this stuff, both in Sacramento and DC, because that's critical. We obviously can't do that in-house. There's so much changing every day and coming down that I think that's a excellent investment that we're doing that. The one thing that I feel is missing from, at least on the state level, is a public safety component dealing with, you know, law enforcement, prosecution, supervision of offenders, things like that. The state of California over the past 15 years, going back to criminal justice realignment in 2010, there's been, you know, hundreds and hundreds of bills that have affected how we operate in the public safety realm. And in my opinion, a lot of those issues have led to hindering our ability to keep our communities safe. So I think that, you know, should be a priority. I know we can't list every single thing, but and I don't know what may or may not be, you know, introduced this year, but it certainly has been a lot of public safety bills introduced every year over the past decade at least. So, thank you.
Supervisor Sabatier?
Well, Vice Chair Rasmussen pretty much hit it right on the nail where I was going. I know that VOCA, the Victims' Rights Act, Victims of Crime Act, I think it is, was taken away last year. The state of California was able to kind of replenish that for the 1 year, but it's still kind of up in the air as to what's going on in the following years. So I think that's a part of that conversation about public safety. I believe we get about $500,000 from rural law enforcement. I don't know the exact title of it. I believe that's federal dollars as well. So there's definitely some public safety dollars that we want to make sure to maintain. And I would say that unfortunately at this moment in time, granted, we got to figure out how to position ourselves within what's going to happen, but we need to play defense in the sense of trying to maintain what we have been receiving to ensure that we can continue to provide the services we are providing. I know in my NACO committees that I'm a part of, that's kind of the position that we're taking, is asking for more probably isn't going to happen, but trying to save and maintain what has been the regular funding sources for some of the services that we could provide locally is really where we're going at this moment in time. But I would love to see public safety added, and if we can add some specifics of what it is that we are receiving to make sure that we continue to receive those. And I see it's under infrastructure, but I know that there's been a lot of new regulatory things coming down for water utilities and others, PFAS, all those things. We haven't necessarily, I don't know that it will impact us because we don't have the industrial surrounding, but regulations do have impact in the long run, which just keep making things more expensive. It's just keeping track of those things, and hopefully that's within the infrastructure portion of it. I know that we're looking at the funding that's available through the IRA, but I just know that things keep getting more difficult, and similar to climate change, we're not necessarily the reason for why climate change is happening here. We don't have a concrete jungle. We're not overly industrialized, but yet we have to deal with the results of those things. And same with some of the regulations where there's reason for looking at some of the problems that they have in their pipes or in their systems in certain areas when we may not have those same issues, but still need to comply with the regulations that come up.
All right. I think you all covered a lot. I'm just going to add another thing. I notice in water reliability, I'm pretty much in agreement with the majority of them, but I really feel like flood risk reduction can be kind of like a standalone, the same way that wildfire, resilience is, and then also in regard to insurance when it comes to that. I know that Scotts Creek has the same flooding issues that are similar in my district. I'm not sure in the others, but there's situations where I think we can focus on that because of the imminent threat that we have, especially with regard to a lot of sedimentation. And then I think wildfire and, flooding come hand in hand, because after a wildfire, again, right there again. So just wanted to throw that in there. Supervisor Sabatier?
I don't disagree. I guess I have a one last comment and a question. My last comment is, I know this is just kind of for the public to be aware, for us to be aware, for our lobbyists to be aware, but do we need to have specific wording in some of the priorities that we have, like to align with like CSAC priorities? Like I see that we talk about homelessness, but we don't bring up at home. Does that need to be identified within the language that's here, or is that just part of the conversation that's already happening? Just kind of curious where that fits, because it would be nice to align with NACO priorities where we can, so that we have not just us acting on our own, but acting with that greater voice. And same thing with CSAC. If some of these priorities align with CSAC priorities, we can make sure to align it with what it is that they're doing. Just kind of curious how we're working all that.
I'm going to comment on that one. Oh, no, go ahead. I was going to come, well, go ahead, you first. What I was going to say is with RCRC, there are a lot that we can align with. However, when we mention Lake Pillsbury, when we're at RCRC, we have others that have a conflicting desire that we want. So it's helpful that it's on ours so that you can address it as well, but we can do our best on that, in that capacity. But what you're talking about, I like.
I apologize for missing out on RCRC. I haven't been there in a long time. And then my question is, we've brought up some new things. Are we given consensus to adding or changing or doing any of those things? Just kind of asking about the process for this review.
I'm sorry, Chair, may I?
Yes.
We would like to hear some consensus on those separate different items so we can add it to the draft for formal acceptance.
I would love to see public safety being added and some language brought back.
Agree.
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 Yeah. And I think also separating flood resiliency as well, as opposed to being in water reliability. And I don't want to add it to wildfire resilience, because I don't want to dilute wildfire resilience, if that makes sense. So having a standalone.
Just a quick question. Are you talking for both the federal and the state?
Yes. Yeah.
I'm okay with that. To me, it would be either emergency disaster and then subcategories of wildfire and flooding, or both separate as its own thing. Either way, I'm okay with the inclusion of that.
I think looking at the heading disaster and then wildfire, we also have heat domes and heat events that are impacting our people. So, I mean, we could make a longer list, or we could just refer to all disasters and resiliency
With subcategories or something like that.
subcategories.
Yeah.
What do you suggest?
So my sense is we're trying to keep the list relatively short, so that when our representatives from Nielsen Merksmer or county staff or supervisors walk in, it's pretty easy to access what our priorities are. So my sense would be a category like disaster resiliency with the subcategories like wildfire and flood resiliency therein. Seems like the right line to walk. Jeff, does that seem right to you as well?
Yeah, I think that's a good way to do it.
Okay. So, and public safety is distinct from the other items that we'd had listed here previously, so we'll come back with language on that. And I did want to remind still that we do have Paragon Government Relations in Zoom, and they'll make a presentation as well.
All right.
So on the roads, I don't see it listed under your infrastructure. Is it listed? We really need some help with our roads here in the county.
On that second bullet, on the funding
Yeah.
for infrastructure and for resources and infrastructure.
I'm looking at Infrastructure and Job Act, so I might be on the wrong
Yes.
page.
And so Supervisor Owen, I just want to clarify, you're looking for within that category calling out roads specifically. Is that correct?
Yes.
And is that the consensus of your board?
Yeah, adding text to the category of infrastructure that says roads, I think is okay, rather than adding another category. Yes,
And then you had a comment?
That was-
it? Okay.
my offer, yeah.
To be clear, I'm good with the flood and the roads.
All right. All right, I think, any other comments? And then you said that they're online and.
Yes. Yes, so next I would like to introduce Joe Cron and the team from Paragon Government Relations. And they'll present on federal level considerations and potential county priorities. Joe, when you're ready?
Thank you very much, Matthew. Can you hear me okay?
We can, yes, thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much for having the team on with you today, and thank you to the board members for having us on once again with you. I do want to introduce and welcome Tom Joseph from Paragon and Ryan Waterman-Aldana, who are on with me as well. A couple of our other team members, Rachel Mackey, Hassan Sarsour, unable to join us. In fact, they're working on some of the emerging issues, including an issue we'll talk about in a minute, the OMB directive that came out last night on pausing federal funding. So they are busy at work on some of those priorities. I did want to maybe at the outset, just sort of related to the legislative priorities discussion, mention, and this is something that our team spoke with Matthew and Stephen about. The way that you have this board members structured for this year, and I think your past years is great. It's a short list of targeted legislative priorities. I think that works well. Something to consider long term, again, that we brought up with Matthew and Stephen, is the idea of the development of a legislative platform. It wouldn't be something you do this year, but maybe in the fall, the legislative platform would be a little bit more detailed. This speaks to some of the supervisors' questions about, do we need to specifically mention roads? Or, for example, within public safety, do we want to mention VOCA? I think a legislative platform document can speak to those specifics, allows you as the board to be a little bit more nimble, I think. Again, a bit more staff work. We're certainly offering our assistance to the CAO team to help develop that. And I know our partners at Nielsen Merksimer and Jeff, we work very well with them, would I think agree with me on that endeavor. So just wanted to mention that up front, that I think that, long term, that's something that we would embrace and we would be willing to work with all of you on. So I'm happy to revisit that in the Q&A, but I do want to just take a few minutes just to kind of talk about some of these priorities, talk about some of what's happening out here in Washington. I guess, in terms of a broad overview, I would say, sort of the theme of the hour or maybe the last week or so is sort of uncertainty. I think folks obviously have read, going back to last night or today, a bit of a firestorm in Washington regarding, again, that OMB, White House OMB memo that I referenced, which basically instructs all federal departments and agencies to undertake a comprehensive review of all federal financial assistance programs and essentially pause funding pending alignment with the Trump administration's priorities, essentially as reflected in the executive orders that have been coming out. A lot of questions about what this means exactly. The Paragon team is working on a memo that we will be providing to you and a bit of an analysis. Again, there's some unknowns. It sounds like this is something that's going to get litigated right out of the gates. I believe that there is a lawsuit that's going to be launched in a Manhattan court today. Again, a lot of concerns from across the country on what this means for state and local government programs. It sounds like things like Social Security, Medicare payments are not swept up in this memorandum. But again, a lot of question about what this means for federal funding, whether it's mandatory entitlement spending or discretionary grant programs. So that's something that's very much top of mind and something our team is working on very directly. In terms of, again, some of these other priorities, happy to talk about them specifically. I think there's, by the way, very good alignment between your draft federal priorities and your state priorities. So I think that's very much a good thing. I know Jeff did a good job of sort of capturing some of the interplay between, of course, the federal funding that comes down to the county, whether it's through the state or directly to the county. I think folks are aware that the current congressional majority is looking at through the budget reconciliation process, which is sort of a fast track process that doesn't face a Senate filibuster. They're looking at the possibility of cuts to a number of county administered safety net programs. So you do see that reflected in your proposed priorities. Certainly in the resilience space, the wildfire insurance, Supervisor Pyska, I know you're involved at the national state level on this, and you know that this is a growing concern and something that while state while a state level focus, certainly there's a federal angle and a federal nexus to this, so that makes the list. Generally, again, resilience FEMA reform, as folks probably saw, the president has suggested that perhaps FEMA would be dismantled or perhaps significantly reformed. We don't really know, again, what a lot of this looks like. We're just at the front end of a lot of sort of large sweeping proposals, but again, I think good issues for you to have on your federal priorities list. And there's a number of others, which the different members of our team handle. Housing and homelessness, obviously huge for your county, huge for statewide. Again, CSAC, I know the at-home proposal was referenced. Things that that our firm is working on. So again, sort of a snapshot of these priorities. I do want to say I think public safety would be a great add-on to this list as well. We would encourage that. Supervisor Sabatier, you had mentioned VOCA funding. The VOCA funds come down from the federal level. I think, as you noted, the state has done some backfilling. There's a budget that's pending. I'll remind folks we do not currently have a budget, a real long-term budget for the current year. There's a March 14th deadline for a new budget to get passed. VOCA is a part of that. There's some proposed increases at the moment in both the House and the Senate bill for the VOCA funds, but that could all get rewritten. So again, I think that might be certainly a good one to add on your short list of priorities. I guess one more thing for us to underscore is, we recognize very directly that these are the county's priorities, the board's priorities, and the priorities that exist to help you serve your constituents there in the county. We work to implement and help you achieve your objectives. So certainly if there are other issues that you would like to add to your federal priorities, we're happy to discuss that with you and your CAO team. And let me maybe start with Tom. Tom, if you want to add in certainly anything on any of the issues or just generally, and Ryan for that matter as well.
Thank you, Joe. I think you covered it. We are, with respect to trying to analyze or decipher the latest directive from OMB on programs and activities. We're working on that memo. And as Joe mentioned, there may be a court challenge today. We're very pleased to be working with the board. My portfolio is health, human services, housing, and homelessness. So looking forward to it.
So thank you to the board and Matthew. Again, we're happy to take questions or discuss any issues further if you'd like.
I don't know who's first. Supervisor Pyska.
Well, thanks for the. I think working on our platform is a goal that we need to pursue. We're just getting our feet wet. Last year was the first year that we had our state representation, so I think that's an appropriate goal for us to work toward in the next year or two. Beyond the points that I made earlier for the state priorities, because they're the same, I also want to mention, before this notice came out last night, we were having conversations with our AAA, Area Agency on Aging, and the Older Americans Act was not passed in the funding resolution that was passed in December. So that impacts us right now. Rachel can speak to that later, but I wanted our board to be aware that even before this happened, we're having emergency meetings because this impacts the meals for our seniors. There's about a $800,000 shortfall for the programs for our seniors. So I know you're tracking this. Matthew and I had a conversation, but I just wanted to bring this awareness to our board that we're already feeling these things. And they are hitting our most vulnerable people.
Supervisor Sabatier.
Yeah, just a couple last things, and appreciate that we are where we are now. But I'm wondering, is there a reporting back to the board of the year's activities of lobbying so that we can make it very public and be made well aware as to what did we gain from having this contract and this relationship? It's not the most costly of contracts that we have, which I greatly appreciate, but I also want to make sure that we're recognizing the benefits of this relationship. And so hoping that we can do an annual, maybe right around this time period might be a good time, I don't know, but getting like an annual report of here's a summary of activities for the county at the state and federal level.
So, and for your boards and public awareness, there was a document included when we adopted the agreement with Nielsen Merckxmer that summarized some of the legislative activities from the initial period that we worked with them, which was just in the year of 2024. But definitely happy to entertain, at a future time, any thoughts from your board as to what you'd like to see if that didn't meet your expectations.
Then I guess a dumb question. As we add items to the list, does that amend the contract where it becomes more expensive, or it's just we have them for a certain number of time, and the more items we add, the less time they can spend on each individual item? Just kind of curious, as we make reviews, I want to know what the impact is.
Well, I think we have our advocates here, and maybe it would be a positive, Jeff, if you can speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, happy to. Good question, Supervisor. I think our contract has a not to exceed amount in it. It wouldn't be an amendment to it. For these are really just as we spend time talking to the members of your legislative delegation, to their staff, as we see bills being introduced by the legislature or budget proposals made either by the administration or the legislature. These really just give us direction as to where to focus our efforts. So it wouldn't be an increased cost or a diminution of the amount of time we spend. If you add public safety, it doesn't take, 2 hours a month away from, whatever other priority. It really just gives us the direction for where to focus our efforts. So I think that speaks to your
No,
question.
I appreciate that. Well, since you answered that way, just a quick question, and I'm looking at Supervisor Pyska because she would have the knowledge, and in fact, maybe even Chair Crandall, because I believe you used to be on the board. But I know workforce development, I haven't gotten myself fully involved yet. We haven't had a meeting at this time. But my understanding is the funding is not vast in what is being offered, and it covers Marin, Sonoma, Mendo, Lake, and Napa, I believe. And that's a large area to provide the scant resources that they already receive. Is that something that we should be looking to add to our list, or do I not know enough and I should just lay off until I know further information? Just wanted to bring it up.
I mean, the funding does come from the state and federal government, and it is directed to individual counties. So, but it is something that we probably should look at, but we have not had a board meeting, so we don't have an update yet. We don't understand how the programs will be impacted yet.
Okay.
So if it's something that, needs addressing, we could probably add it to the priorities when we have a better understanding.
Okay, thank you.
Vice Chair?
Yes, again, good presentation. I think this is a good list, but if we have consensus, I do think we should have public safety on the federal list as well.
All right. Any other comments? Should I open it to the public now? All right.
Joe has it.
Who?
Joe.
Okay. Sir, Joe, go ahead and unmute. I see your hand up.
Yep. Thank you very much, Supervisor. Just wanted to very briefly just indicate, since the question was asked about the lobbying contract, similar to what Jeff described. Additional issues to this list would not result in additional costs. We view this as a comprehensive advocacy package. That's what we entered into with the county. So yes, I mean additional. We don't bill hourly. This is not the situation we're going to get billed more for adding more issues or for, and that's often the way the federal work works, quite frankly, is, issues will come out of the woodwork, new things will emerge, and we're prepared to handle those, for you. I would just say, I think it is to the county's benefit as it is to all the, the folks we represent. And maybe this is sort of a Jerry Maguire moment, channeling my old boss used to say, if everything's a priority, nothing's a priority. So the fact that you do have a targeted list, I think is very much to your benefit. I think that's good, whether you have a comprehensive platform in place or not. So, and again, we feel that this is a good targeted list to work off of. Thank you.
Yeah, just one other comment about FEMA, because there could be changes. And as you're probably aware, I did get appointed to the NACO task force for the FEMA reform program. I know you're following that closely. I'm not sure we need to put it as our priority because there are so many unknowns, but we are compiling our experiences over the last decade so that we can show where there are some gaps and areas where the programs could be improved. So just be aware that we're working on that, and I intend to bring it to the task force no later than the NACO conference, when I'll see you in DC. But I know that that will help, since we're already going through the effort to bring that together. And across agencies, we're asking the cities, the fire protection districts, the water districts to really all contribute to this so that you have a really clear awareness of what we've been through and what could be helpful as changes could likely happen to the general FEMA programs.
That's very helpful. Thank you, Supervisor.
All right. With that, we can now open it up to the public. All right.
Alan Fletcher, Lucerne. Are you coming back to broadband? Because serving the little hills and valleys up in your zone, maybe you shouldn't be looking at laying fiber, but looking up in the skies and hooking up with the Starlink or the other schemes that are coming through that deliver broadband without any wires laid through your difficult to cover canyons and the like. The second point is I belong to a population of which I think I'm fairly typical, which is almost poor. If I earned 1/6 of my income less, which I get from Social Security, I would qualify for up to $10,000 a month of benefits because I was Medicare income eligible. So for instance, I don't get IHSS. If I earned 1/6 less, I could get $10,000 a month of IHS benefits, which I would have to pay for out of my own pocket. So I don't think that's anything the county can solve, but I just want you to know that there are some of us who are almost poor. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments in the chambers? Sue? Okay. Sterling, if you can unmute.
I believe I did. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you now.
Okay, cool. Thank you. So this is a perfect topic that I've been actually wanted to talk to at first. The state board is there. I live out in Spring Valley. We are a community, or actually a subdivision of 30 plus homes. We live in a very high fire danger, as Eddie knows. We only have one way in and one way out. Prime example, this November, a dump truck's fuel tank blew up on New Long Valley Road. Thank God we just had the rain because it was spreading into the vegetation. You would have had over 1,000 people stuck inside Spring Valley with no way out due to fire. We are a high fire risk. There is ways that we can get grants. I do believe that the county does need to look into this. I have looked into it through CAL FIRE, so the state and you guys could probably put this on here to where we can get it. It says California Resources Code 4290.5. If you guys look it up, we'll let you guys know, down to section 51178. So I am asking you guys to please put a grant for a bridge to go over Old Long Valley. We used to have one, it blew out, and ever since then it hasn't been put back on the things to get grants for this. It has everything to do with wildfire. It has everything to do with the public safety out here, and also flooding. We have a major slide in front of our dam, and if that slide goes down, our dam breaks, and you're going to have a North Carolina happening. So I am requesting that you guys please take this into consideration. You guys are above county, you are state, and we need to start looking into this. I do believe by state requirements, any subdivision that has 30 plus homes, that it has to have another way in and another way out, and that is at a state level. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else on Zoom? All right. We'll bring it back to the board for any further discussion.
I would probably, hitting home the infrastructure and the roads again, I think throughout the county, there's areas that are problematic for being trapped in the event of emergencies. And that's something I think we should really be looking at and improving our infrastructure for emergency exits.
And I'll talk about the exit for Spring Valley when we get to Public Works a little later, because I have talked to him about it, and so I don't want to delve too far off into that topic when we're talking about this as of now. So we'll get into that later, but noted, I agree. And so with that, anything else? Is there anything else to add?
I just want to say a quick thank you to Jeff and Joe and their teams that helped prepare for today's presentation. I think it was really valuable. Gives a great sense of overview of what we're looking at moving forward. And thank you, board members and members of the public, for your excellent input and engagement. Appreciate it.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I know we have a long day, but I think we should take a 5-minute break before we get into the next item.